thanks very much for joining Immersion Plus today. And if you're joining for the first time, my name is David Borean from NEC. I'm delighted that you've taken some time to join this next presentation. Customers often ask us how they can innovate like Amazon. From very humble beginnings as a startup in a garage, Amazon has not only innovated across e-commerce, but it's also introduced new businesses that really at first glance just don't seem to fit their model. But over the years, Amazon has become very good at tackling hard problems and finding easy ways to solve them. In this session, you'll be introduced to how Amazon organises for innovation with its mechanisms, its architecture, culture, and as an organisation. You also have the chance to dive deep into the topic, including their leadership principles, working backwards, and two pizza teams. So it's a real pleasure today to introduce the Head of Technology and Transformation for ANZ Public Sector for AWS. And they are one of our platinum partners. We're really delighted to introduce Simon Elisha. So over to you, Simon, and thanks again for being part of Immersion Plus.
Thanks, David, for that kind introduction, and I will use my power of sharing to make sure I share my deck correctly. Excellent. There we go. All working. So thank you for taking the time to have a chat today and to be part of this great event. So people often ask, how is Amazon innovative? What do we do to make innovation possible? Because it doesn't just happen. Let's get this there. Right. And so really it starts with our mission. And our mission is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. We've decided to put the customer at the center of everything we do. Now that's a great motherhood statement or mission type statement, but what does it actually mean and how do we put it into play? Well, what we do is we start with the customer and we work backwards. And doing this brings a lot of really unexpected components or opportunities that you may not think of. Most people think, well, yeah, we listen to our customers, who do what our customers want. But Jeff Bezos put it really in a very interesting way recently, one of his shareholder letters, where he said that one of the advantages of being customer-centric is that customers are always beautifully, wonderfully dissatisfied. Even when they report that they're happy and business is great, they don't know what they don't know yet, and there's always something more we can do, which is a tremendous opportunity and an advantage. And I can tell you that when I go to meetings with my customers, one of the things I always ask them, even in a meeting that went really well, is what is it that we can be doing better? So what does that mean from a practical perspective? Well, that means that we've created a raft of different businesses over time that, again, as David mentioned, aren't necessarily obvious. So yes, we started shipping CDs, DVDs, and books because they were easy to ship. But then we created cloud computing with AWS. We disrupted the reading market by creating the Kindle. We got into video, groceries, even self-service, wonderful experience, no checkout shopping experiences. Now, all of these were created based on what customers needed. Now you may say, well, that's great. Do you just go in and identify what's needed and go right ahead? And the answer is no. The answer is we need to be stubborn on the vision, but flexible on the details. And it's an easy statement to make, but it's really hard because we tend to have a strong set of beliefs. We believe in our vision. We want to get there and we're just going to crash through. But having an end vision about what that customer experience is, but then being flexible in how you get there, is an immensely powerful capability. So how do we organise for innovation? I'm going to talk about four key things here: culture, mechanisms, architecture, and organisation. I will dive deep into each of those to help you understand a little bit more about what they mean and how they work. So number one is culture. We hire people who are customer obsessed. We hire builders, we let them build, but we support them with a belief system. We spend a lot of time on our hiring process, but it doesn't stop there. Central to what we do is the DNA of what we call our leadership principles. And these are a set of components that help us keep one another accountable in how we make our decisions. Now, if you look at some of these leadership principles, you'll see things like bias for action, learn and be curious, write a lot, think big, frugality. There are things that are very much in tension with one another. And this is intentional because this is a decision-making filter that we use to help figure out what we should do. So on the one hand, you may say, well, think big, I can do whatever I want, be as big as I want. But frugality means I shouldn't be spending too much, so I need to think about better ways to invent and simplify to get a great customer outcome. I may want to dive deep and spend a lot of time on something, but I still need to be delivering results. I may have a bias for action, but I still need to be learn and be curious. All these things are really in tension with one another. The other thing that this helps us is through communication. These are phrases, terms that are used each and every day here at Amazon and help us communicate really efficiently with one another all through the organization to help guide our thinking and the way we want to do things. So to unpack a couple of those that are really relevant to today's conversation, invent and simplify. I'll let you take a moment to read that slide just to see what we mean by that. One of the main things about this particular leadership principle is that last sentence. We accept that we may be misunderstood for long periods of time. It is really uncomfortable being misunderstood. We don't like it from a social perspective, but it's actually important when it comes to innovation. I'll give you an example. Now that little device on the left there is not the most beautiful device you've ever seen. And certainly when we brought that to market, people were like, what's Amazon doing? Why would they create this? It makes no sense. The vision was not, let's build an e-reader. The vision was, I want a grandmother or grandfather to be sitting in their house and be able to order and read a book within 90 seconds. Stubborn on the vision, flexible on the details. When you're flexible on the details, you get to that thing on the right, which is probably a much better iteration of what we came up first with. But it includes delightful features like WhisperNet and global access and all these other cool things. You can also be misunderstood by some very well-informed people. So when Amazon launched Amazon Web Services, which I'm a part of, you can see Business Week and reported that Wall Street didn't react particularly positive. In fact, they said, just mind the store, thanks, Jeff. We'll look after everything else. And what that would have robbed us from was a service that provides services to millions of customers all around the world. That's provided over 1,957 new features just in financial year 18. And provided 78 price reductions for customers. It allows us to power the internet of the future with what was termed back then a risky bet. What about bias for action? We talk about speed, but the key to speed is understanding that many decisions, not all, but many decisions and actions are reversible. And what that means is we don't have to do exhaustive and extensive study. We can calculate our risk. Now you may say, well, how do I know when to take that risk? And we have a concept called a one-way or two-way door. If it's a one-way door, it's a decision that can't be undone. We want to dive deep. We want to make sure we get it right. We do every piece of due diligence we can. If it's a two-way door, something that's easily reversible, then we want to make the decision quickly. Typically, the decision is made in one meeting. Typically, we may only have 70% of the data as a rough estimate, but we can make that decision. The next element is mechanisms. And mechanisms came about because we recognize that everyone comes to work with good intentions. People want to do the right thing, but the right thing doesn't always happen, does it? So what we need to do is encode behaviors that allow us to do things the way we know they should be done, but in a way that doesn't constrain thinking. So when we talk about innovation, the working backwards process is our mechanism to help make sure that we remain customer obsessed and we work backwards from the customer. And this process starts with a press release. And that's the reason why we call it working backwards. Because in most organizations, we do product analysis, we build a product, we then pass it across to marketing and say, hey, go write a press release and release this product. We believe that's the wrong way around. We believe we should spend a huge amount of time writing the press release to encapsulate our understanding of the benefit that comes to the customer and why we might be doing this. And I'll add that we do this for internal facing projects, not just externally facing projects, because it focuses your thinking in. Then you create an FAQ, frequently asked questions, and even some visuals. And I'll show you what those look like in a moment. But the first point is to start with who is the customer? And let's be really specific about their context and their needs and how this will actually benefit what they're doing. So we have 5 key questions that we ask. We ask, who is the customer? Sounds like an easy question. As with most of these broad-based questions, they're not easy questions. What is the customer problem or opportunity? Is the most important customer benefit clear? Not your organizational benefit, the customer benefit. How do you know what customers need or want? Are we guessing? Are we copying? Have we done analytics, etc.? And what does the customer experience look like? Think about your own shopping experience. You remember shopping experiences that are good and that are not good based upon that particular experience. So some of the artifacts that we create are firstly the press release, a one-page written document that articulates in the language of the customer what the benefits would be. Then we have a set of frequently asked questions, both external and internal, that help flesh out the detail of that particular service or product or idea. And finally, depending on what we are building, a set of visuals that vary in fidelity as we get into more detail to say, well, here's what the customer experience may look like. Now, once we have these artifacts together, we do something really interesting and almost unique, I think, to AWS and to Amazon, which is we sit down as a collective and we read the document. And for people who are new to Amazon, it's quite a daunting or unusual experience because we used to sort of, rush into a meeting, someone throws up some slides and waves their arms around and away we go and everyone's rushing off and they're on their phones, etc. What we found is that's not a great way to make decisions. So we come into a room together, we schedule an hour, and we'll spend the first 20 minutes sitting quietly and reading. And this is because it means that everyone has time to actually read the document, get on the same page, have all the same data available to them, and then we discuss the document. Not the idea, the document. We ask questions, we debate, we talk about things, we suggest changes, etc. And depending on the nature of the document, the stage it's at, we can often make a decision based upon what's in that document. Now, it is a lot of work to create that document. And people often say, well, it feels like a lot of work, what do we do? And it's interesting, this question actually came up in an all hands inside Amazon not too long ago. And so Jeff Bezos has some words to say about this. So if the technology gods smile upon me, this short video will tell you what Jeff had to say about this topic.
Is the working backwards process optional? It sounds great, but it seems like a lot of work. Oh boy, how do we begin? The working backwards process should not be optional unless you know a better way. And you shouldn't know a better way until you've tried the working backwards process several times. The working backwards process really does work. And this particular thing here, it sounds great, but it seems like a lot of work. Done correctly, the working backwards process is a huge amount of work, but it saves you even more work later. The working backwards process is not designed to be easy. It's designed to save huge amounts of work on the back end and to make sure that we're actually building the right thing. What so many companies do is they write the software, that's a lot of work. They get it all working, and then they throw it over the wall of the marketing department and say, okay, here's what we built, write the press release for it. That process is the one that's actually backwards.
So there you have it from the horse's mouth, as it were. But really what it is, recognizing that it is not a shortcut. It is not easy, but it's way easier than making all the effort for something that doesn't work or is the wrong thing. So how do we think about architecture? Well, what we do is we seek to create an architectural structure from a technology standpoint that supports rapid growth and change. And the number one thing for this is to take the gatekeepers away and provide full self-service. Many of you will be involved in organizations where to get a server takes weeks, if not months, where to make a network change feels like writing a new constitution, where everything costs money to do. And it's hard to innovate when you can't move quickly, make changes, make decisions, try things and undo them very, very quickly. So we focused very much on having completely self-service, API-driven access to the right technology components. And that's basically how AWS came about, is a selection of services and capabilities that are completely self-service in pretty much any domain you can think that you might need from a technology standpoint. And really what we found is it was the agility of this that really unlocked a lot of innovation, not just for us, but for customers as well. Because they could make very quick decisions and have a lot of two-way doors. In the old days, if you chose a database, you'd bought your licenses, your hardware, your software, your services. That's the database you can use. In this world, you can choose one database today, realize it's the wrong choice, move off it, turn it off, never pay for it again, and move on to the new thing, using the right tool for the right job. And this model also works at massive scale. A few years ago, we released this particular figure, which is how many deployments we do in our environment every year, 194 million deployments. And this is because we have lots and lots of teams operating at scale to a common standard of quality and behavior baked in by that DNA, but unconstrained in the velocity they can move. So let me talk a little bit about that organization, because that's a key part here. We want very small, empowered teams that have a very strong sense of ownership. And I'll explain why that's important in a moment. But firstly, we want to hire builders and we want to let them build. So we're hiring people who like to create, who like to make, who like to own, and are passionate and involved and engaged in what they do. And a shortcut of how we like to organize these teams is we don't believe in big teams. We believe in what we call 2 pizza teams. Now, we can debate the size of the pizzas and the size of the appetites of the people on the team, but you can think 6 to 10 people is kind of the size of a team that we want. We want to decentralize these teams and put the skills in the team that is necessary to get the job done. And we give them ownership of what they build. We have a saying, you build it, you run it. So again, in many organizations, there's a build piece and a run piece, and it gets thrown over the fence, and the poor people on the run side are dealing with the decisions made on the build side who don't understand what happens on the run side, and it's not great. When we moved to this model many years ago, what we found very quickly was code quality improved dramatically, because the people that wrote the code were getting out of bed at night to answer the escalations when the code failed. Suddenly, quality went through the roof. The other thing about ownership is allowing people to have choice in how they build something. It's not fair to say, you own this, this is yours, if you had no decision-making capability in any of the components you're looking after. But if you know you're going to own a service, you're going to build it in such a way that it's resilient, reliable, and you have great passion in making it as good as it can be, so you can make those choices. It's ownership and autonomy. They go together. Another concept you really try and focus on is experimenting early and frequently. And I want to spend a moment to really emphasize the meaning of the word experiment, because I think in many times you'll be in meetings like I have where people have been using the word experiment and it sort of doesn't mean what they think it means. And this comes again from one of the shareholder letters that Jeff Bezos releases every year. And the element here is that failure and invention, I should say, are inseparable twins. To invent, you have to experiment. If you know in advance it's going to work, it's not an experiment. That's the number one thing. If you're looking for a guaranteed outcome, you are not innovating, you are not experimenting, you're just doing what others had done. So if you genuinely want to innovate, you have to expect not everything is going to be a winner. And what distinguishes that mentality is how you treat that failure or that lack of success for a particular experiment or an outcome you didn't expect. And we often find it hard culturally to accept that we have failed because we want to succeed. But let me give you some examples of some pretty large scale failures we've had over time, but what we did with them. So back in the day, we created auctions, which was intended to be part of the auction market. We did then tried again with Z shops, failed again. But now we have marketplace, which is a significant component of how we sell to customers now. But it took us 2 goes to get that right, and we learned a hell of a lot on the way. The Fire Phone, for example, I would almost wager that none of you are sitting there with your trusty Fire Phone today. We lost a lot of money on that particular experiment, but that's okay. Because if you've used an Alexa device or any of those Amazon home automation devices, the team that built the Fire Phone and learned a huge amount from a technology and hardware perspective are part of the Alexa team. So again, we invested money in an experiment to learn to do something better the next time. So those components are fourfold. Culture. We maintain a customer-obsessed culture. We hire builders. We let them build and we give them a common belief system that they can rely upon from the very top leader all the way to the most on-the-ground employee. We provide a set of mechanisms that overcome good intentions, that facilitate innovative thinking, but give us some guidance so we know we're hitting the things we need to hit. We provide an architecture that is flexible and supports rapid growth and change and the ability to move quickly without having to ask for approval, where governance and risk management is appropriate to what we're doing, not a blanket statement. And finally, we emphasize small, empowered teams that own what they create. We allow people to have an investment in what they do and how they do it, to make the important choices and to feel empowered to make decisions that make their customers delighted. The other interesting thing about innovation that Jeff has spoken about is the fact that the most transformational of inventions are often those that let others unleash their own creativity to build upon us. If you think about AWS, it couldn't have been built without the internet. And now we see customers building all manner of amazing solutions on AWS because of the things we've invented on their behalf, and so on and so forth. So I hope this session has helped you think a little bit more about innovation. And I'd like to hand it back to David and would welcome some Q&A.
Great, Simon. Thank you. Thanks very much for those incredible insights. And for many who have joined us today, who have perhaps had a look under the Duna, under the Amazon Duna for the first time in that depth, you've certainly provided some great context around just that fabric, that culture that drives innovation within what is an incredible organisation. We do have some time for a couple of questions. But while you're thinking about that, I might also just advise everyone that Simon's going to be available in the networking virtual environment. So up on the toolbar, there's a networking tab, which after this presentation is concluded, you can just click on Meet the Speakers, and Simon will be there to answer any questions, perhaps one-on-one, if you want to have a private conversation with him. And we'll have a look at that in a moment. We'll also just we're also, as you know, running a snap poll. For those of you that aren't aware, at the moment we're running a snap poll, which is just a 10-15 second poll that's going to appear on your screen right now. So we'll just take a little moment to look at these 3 questions. Did the presentation add value to you today? 0 to 5. I'm more informed about the subject matter, 0 to 5, or I'd like to know more about this subject. And if you can take a moment to have a look at that, that would be fantastic. Simon, we've got a question that's just come in before we reveal the responses to that poll. So someone's saying, thank you. This is from Jordan. Where can we find out more about working backwards process?
So we can provide some links to the working backwards process on the Amazon website. And also for organizations that want to do it at scale, we do run the working backwards process for our customers as well when we're engaging with them to help them really own that concept at an executive level. What we find is that it's the executive level that needs to really change a lot of thinking around how innovation takes place. Because I'm yet to meet an executive that doesn't want to do innovation, but often the question is, well, how do I do this? How do I make it easy? And how do I make it acceptable?
Indeed, it's breaking some of those long-held paradigms and that sort of legacy thinking that you've got to in order to move forward. So you're right; it does need to be enabled by the executive level. So let's take a look, Simon. Let's take a look at the Snap poll now and see the responses to the questions. Those 3 questions should be appearing on your screen right now. So you can see that question 1: did the presentation add value to you today? Well, Simon. Pretty much you've got close to 90% of the audience is saying that it added value today. Also, clearly people are far more informed about, I think, Amazon and the type of strategies that you deploy. And absolutely people would like to know more about this particular subject matter. So the great thing about that is that not only can you meet Simon in the speakers lounge, so that's in your virtual networking lounge up on your toolbar, but you can also talk to a number of Simon's colleagues at the AWS exhibit. So if you just click into the exhibit stand as well, there's people there ready to chat to you. You can download a whole raft of information and go from there. Before we wrap up this session, just a very quick reminder. In this auditorium, there is also a whole range of on-demand sessions. They're the Let's Talk sessions. Whole raft of intriguing content that's been developed for you. So to give you a couple of examples, there's a solutions talk on cloud computing, which has actually been put together by one of the NEC National Solutions Managers, Chris Cicluna. There's also a leader talk from communications expert Tony Bulmer, who covers a subject matter which is really dear to all of our hearts at the moment, which is connecting as a leader in a new world, in a virtual world. And you can also look at a partner talk. One of our key sponsors, Gunal Kanan from BMC Software, gearing to become an autonomous digital enterprise. So these are all available on demand, not just today, as is Simon's presentation, not just today, but for the next 3 months on this platform through this link. So if you could take a moment to familiarise yourself through that toolbar experience, that'd be great. And look, join us again at 12:25 for what we hope will be a great presentation from the CEO of Nice in Contact, Mr. Paul Jarman, coming live from the US. Until then, Simon, thanks again for your time today and for your participation in Immersion Plus.
Pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks. Cheers.